Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we are picking up where we left off in journal collection number 30 of the journals of Ralph Waldo Emerson. We are up to July 3rd of the year 1839, and that's where we will start. July 3rd. In Boston yesterday and the day before, and saw the Austin Gallery and the Athenaeum, and met Margaret Fuller, Miss Clark, Dwight, and young Ward on that ground, and Alcott on the broader platform. In the Austin Gallery the Polish Jews are an offense to me. They degrade and animalize. As soon as a beard becomes anything but an accident, we have not a man, but a Turk, a Jew, a satyr, a dandy, a goat. So we paint angels and Jesus and Apollo beardless, and the Greek and the Mohawk, leave them to muftis and monks. The landscapes please me well. I like them all. He is a fine pastoral poet, and invites us to come again and again. The drawing also of the figures is always pleasing, but they lack fire, and the impression of the gallery, though bland, is faint in the memory. Nothing haunts the memory from it. It never quickens a pulse of virtue. It never causes an emulous throb. Herein, perhaps, it resembles the genius of Spenser, and is, as I have said, Elysian. When I went to Europe, I fancied the great pictures were great strangers, some new unexperienced pomp and show, a foreign wonder, barbaric pearl and gold. I now require this of all pictures, that they domesticate me, not that they dazzle me. Austin's St. Peter is not yet human enough for me. It is too picturesque, and like a bronze cast of the Socrates or Venus. July 3rd. Once the doctrine of hatred must be preached as the counteraction of the doctrine of love when the pules and wines. I have no duties so peremptory as my intellectual duties. July 5th. Edward Palmer left my house yesterday morning after staying here 4 days. His mind has grown since he was here last fall. He said he did not think it necessary for him to write anything, for he thought he could do everything that came into his mind, and so not need any record. Why should we write dramas and epics and sonnets and novels in 2 volumes? Why not write as variously as we dress and think? A lecture is a new literature, which leaves aside all tradition, time, place, circumstance, and addresses an assembly as mere human beings, no more. It has never yet been done well. It is an organ of sublime power, a panharmonicon for variety of note. But only then is the orator successful when he is himself agitated, and is as much a hearer as any of the assembly. In that office you may and shall, please God, yet see the electricity part from the cloud, and shine from one part of heaven to the other. July 7th. Reform. The objection to conforming to usages that have become dead to you is, that it scatters your force. I owe much to these beneficent reformers of all colors and qualities. Each one shows me that there is somewhat I can spare, shows me thus how rich I am. Within my trench there is a wall. If the town be taken, there is yet a citadel. If the tower be stormed, there is still the invincible me. I thank Edward Palmer for this demonstration, and for one other recorded on the last page. In regard to his money movement, however, discussion always shows that the principle now and always takes effect, and that it would not much alter things to take money out of society, but it would alter things much to put the love in. Great men have always played with property, and used it as though they used it not. Spirit is all acts indifferent. The sublime is always the true. Palmer had somewhat great in him, a certain negligence of statement and extreme carelessness, whether he was understood or not. He makes it felt also how surely a sincere person is raised by a partial into an universal reform. There is no time to roses. So shall man one day live with a living nature, happy and strong in the deep present. There is no time to just men. the profuse roses blow. Men are made as drunk by party as by rum. In this county they have let a proven defaulter be chosen to Congress over an affectionate, honest, able gentleman, because, as the lovely philanthropists say, the only question they ask is, what is his relation to the slave? Thus you cease to be a man that you may be an abolitionist. There is no art where society is unbelieving, honeycombed, and hollow, but when it tingles and trembles with earnest will beauty be born. Be hospitable to the soul as well as to the body of thy guest, thou tart hater. Miracles. The miracle is always spiritual, always within the man, affecting his senses from the soul, so that the lover walks in miracles, and the man beside him sees nothing. The believer sees nothing as he ever saw it before. The unbeliever looks at the same facts and reads the old dull story. The true disciple never therefore magnifies the sensible miracle. He ignores it also. He says, I knew a man once, whether in the body or out of the body I cannot tell. God knoweth. Mass. Extempore speaking can be good, and written discourses can be good. A tent is a very good thing, but so is a cathedral. Reform. The past has baked my loaf, and in the strength of its bread I break up the old oven. A lady, it seems, has painted the auxiliary verbs do, ought, might, cannot. I gave C.S. for a subject, the age, to be represented in a series of heads: conservatism, State Street, Christian Register, revolt, protest, fair perplexity, dyspepsia, Warren Chapel. What possibilities! In the country church I see the cousins of Napoleon, of Wellington, of Wilberforce, of Bentham, of Humboldt. A little air and sunshine, an hour of need, a provoking society would call out the right fire from these slumbering peasants. I went to the woods and heard the wood thrush sing, Ah, Willy, Willy, he Willy-o, Willy-o. We want all the elements of our being. High culture cannot spare one. We want the exact and the vast. We want our dreams and our mathematics. We want our folly and guilt. Yet a majestic soul never unfolds all these in speech. They lie at the base of what is said and color the word, but are reserved. You may be Goethe, but not Bettina. July 9th. Wonderful Bettina, the rich, inventive genius of the painter must all be smothered and lost for want of the power of drawing. And when I walk in Walden Wood, as on 4th of July, I seem to myself an inexhaustible poet, if only I could once break through the fence of silence and vent myself in adequate rhyme. Nature is two-headed. Invoked or uninvoked, God will be there. Et vocatus et non vocatus Deus aderit. It is even capable of a sublimer extension, that the unhappiness of hell is overpowered by a happiness. All which liveth tendeth to good, it cannot be otherwise. I like my boy, with his endless sweet soliloquies and iterations, and his utter inability to conceive why I should not leave all my nonsense business and writing, and come to tie up his toy horse, as if there was or could be any end to nature beyond his horse. And he is wiser than we when threatens his whole threat. Quote, I will not love you. End quote. Nature delights in punishing stupid people. The very strawberry vines are more than a match for them with all their appetites and all their fumbling fingers. The little defenseless vine coolly hides the best berry, now under this leaf, then under that, and keeps the treasure for yonder darling boy with the bright eyes when Booby is gone. July 14th. I desire that my housekeeping should be clean and sweet, that it should not shame or annoy me. I desire that it should appear in all its arrangements that human culture is the end to which that house is built and garnished. I wish my house to be a college, open as the air to all to whom I spiritually belong, and who belong to me, that it is not open to others, or for other purposes. I do not wish that it should be a confectioner's shop wherein eaters and drinkers may get strawberries and champagne. I do not wish that it should be a playground or house of entertainment for boys. They do well to play. I like that they should, but not with me or in these precincts. July 16th. The abandon of a scatterbrain, the abandon of a woman are no better than calculation, but the abandon of a self-commanding and reserved mind is like the fire of troops when the enemy is at the end of the bayonet. July 17th. Manners demonological. Beauty dwells also in the will. You plant a tree for your son or for mankind in the next age. Decline also the low suggestion, establish the lofty purpose in the moment when it flits so evanescently by, and you plant bodily beauty for the next age. Who saw you do the mean act? Ah, brother, your manners saw you, and they shall always report it to men. People do not distinguish between perception and notion. June 20th. Night in this enchanting season is not night, but a miscellany of lights. The journeying twilight, the half-moon, the kindling Venus, the beaming Jove, Saturn, and Mars something less bright, and, fainter still, the common people of the sky, as Crashaw said. Then below the meadows and thickets flashing with the fireflies, and all around the farms, the steadier lamps of men compose the softest, warmest illumination. A poet is a namer. His success is a new nomenclature. August 1st. Last night came to me a beautiful poem from Henry Thoreau, Sympathy. The purest strain and the loftiest, I think, that has yet pealed from this unpoetic American forest. I hear his verses with as much triumph as I point to my Guido when they praise half poets and half painters. I have no right of nomination in the choice of my friends. Sir, I should be happy to oblige you, but my friends must elect themselves. A thought is a prison also. August 14th. The way in which the doctrine of immortality of the soul is taught and heard is false. It is duration, but there is no warrant for teaching this. There is no promise to Aaron and Abner that Aaron and Abner shall live. It is only the soul that, in rare awakenings, saith through all her being, I am, and time is below me. And the awkward understanding translates the rapture into English prose, and saith, That voice came out of a mortal man, and he said that he should live a good many thousand years. It will not serve any good purpose to avail ourselves of the healing formula with which our wives and the kind-hearted mediate between the truth speaker and the churchman, and affirming that the difference is merely in terms, that we misunderstand each other, etc., etc., and inferring that our discrepancy is only on the threshold of speculation, that after we have stated our whimsy of instinct, of the one mind, of the potential infinitude of every man, and the like, our doctrines then become identical with all orthodoxy, and differences vanish. That it is not so. It is the peculiarity of truth that it must live every moment in the beginning, in the middle, and onward forever in every stage of statement. I cannot accept without qualification the most indisputable of your axioms. I see that they are not quite true. August 16th. Conversation is an evanescent relation, no more. With those devouring eyes, with that portraying hand, Carlyle has seen Webster. August 19th. This old complaint of the Unitarians that the Calvinists deny them fellowship and access to the communion table is a plain confession that their religion is naught, that they have no vision. Whoso has never begs allowance. He commands and awes men. Fox and Penn, Swedenborg and Very never complain of not being admitted, but complain that none come and ask admittance. Editor's note. On August 23rd, Mr. Emerson set forth for the hill country of New Hampshire with a companion, probably his friend Mr. George P. Bradford, The following notes remain on a loose sheet of paper. Center Harbor, New Hampshire, August 25th. Burke is a rhetoric, a robe to be always admired for the beauty with which he drapes facts, as we love light, or rather color, which clothes all things. What rich temperance, what costly textures, what flowing variety! Manners need somewhat negligent and even slow in the perceptions, as business requires quick perceptions. Manners must have an ignoring eye, a languid, graceful hand, a sluggard knight who does not see the annoyances, inconveniences, shifts that cloud the brow and smother the voice of the sensitive. The popular men and women are often externally sluggish, lazy natures, not using superlatives, nor staking their all on every peppercorn. August 27th. Yesterday ascended Red Hill and saw our lake and Squam Lake, Ossipee, Conway, Gunstock, and one dim summit which stood to us for the White Hills. Mrs. Cook lives on this red mountain, half a mile from the top and a mile from the bottom. We asked her what brought her here 51 years ago. She said, "Poverty brought and poverty kept her here." For our parts, we thought that a poor man could not afford to live here, that it was to increase poverty tenfold to set one's cabin at this helpless height. Her son makes 1,000 pounds of maple sugar in a year. They use the coffee bean for coffee and the fever bush for tea. The hedysarum, which they call wild bean, was the principal food of the cows when they first came here until grass grew. There is no man in mountain or valley, but only abortions of such, and a degree of absurdity seems to attach to nature. On Sunday we heard sulphurous Calvinism. The preacher railed at Lord Byron. I thought Lord Byron's vice better than Reverend Mr. M.'s virtue. He told us of a man he had seen on Lake Michigan who saw his ship in danger and said, if the Almighty would only stand neuter for 6 months, it was all he asked. In his horror at this sentiment, the preacher did not perceive that it was the legitimate interference from his own distorting creed, that it was the reductio ad absurdum of Calvinism. Concord, September 4th. In the journey to the White Mountains from which I returned Monday evening, 2nd September, I found few striking experiences. Nature seems ashamed of man, and stands away from him, even while he lives from her bounty. The men and women whom we see live in their sensations, and repeat in memory and talk their paltriest satisfactions. The profile mountain was a pleasing wonder. I admire the great and grave expression of this mountain bust, where nature herself has done what Lysippus and Michelangelo projected, which sternly gazes eastward to the sea. Black eagles were wheeling over the summit when I saw it, but I believe the most agreeable circumstance in the tour was the echo of the horn blown at the door of the White Mountain Hotel, Fabian's, which turned the mountains into an Aeolian harp, and instantly explained the whole Attic mythology of Diana and all divine hunters and huntresses. How lofty, how haughtily beautiful is a musical note. Editor's note. Mr. Emerson had been thus far in the year below his standard of health, and went to the mountains for strength. On his return he wrote to his brother William that he had gained little. Quote, I am as usual neither sick nor well, but, for aught I see, as capable of work as ever, let once my subject stand like a good ghost, palpable before me. But since I came home I do not write much, and writing is always my meter of health. Writing, which a sane philosopher would say was the surest index of a diseased mind. A depressing circumstance, moreover, was that he saw the necessity of preparing another course of Boston lectures, because of the strain on his finances due to the advances for the publication here of his friend Carlyle's books. See Cabot's Memoir, Volume 2, pages 392 and 393. September 5th. How tedious is the perpetual self-preservation of the traveler! His whole road is a comparison of what he sees and does at home with what he sees and does now. Not a blessed moment does he forget himself, and, yielding to the new world of facts that environ him, utter without memory that which they say. Could he once abandon himself to the wonder of the landscape, he would cease to find it strange. In New Hampshire, the dignity of the landscape made more obvious the meanness of the tavern-haunting man. I do not know that I can recall the thought of last Thursday which made the mountains greater. Margaret Fuller and Frederick Henry Hedge must have talent in their associates, and they find that they forgive many defects. They do not require simplicity. I require genius, and if I find that, I do not need talent, and talent without genius gives me no pleasure. George Bradford's verdict on a poem or a man I should value more than theirs, for Hedge would like more, and George Bradford not. I am enlarged by the access of a great sentiment of a virtuous impulse. It is the direct income of God. I am not enlarged by a prodigy, a raising of Lazarus, a turning water into wine. Open my eyes by new virtue, and I shall see miracles enough in this current moment of time. You prefer to see a dove descending visibly on Jesus. I acknowledge his baptism and by the Spirit of God. And which is greater and more affecting, to see some wonderful bird descending out of the sky, or to see the rays of a heavenly majesty of the mind and heart emitted from the countenance of a man? Good reading is an art also. I would read the great action and great passiveness of Fabius, his perfect equanimity under the popular odium and general calamity, as the exhortation which the great God gives me for this day's bread. As Bonaparte organized victory in the French armies, I would organize the old eternal heroism in mine. Society thinks of nothing less than of appropriating the fine sentiments which are repeated in it. They are merely ornaments for show days, as when a very wealthy and hard aristocrat declaims with fine tones, quote, "Let such and such only tread this sacred floor, as dare to love their country and be poor." End quote. The true conciseness of style would be such a writing as no dictionaries, but events and character only could illustrate. September 12th. How to spend a day nobly is the problem to be solved, beside which all the great reforms which are preached seem to me trivial. If any day has not the privilege of a great action, then at least raise it by a wise passion. If thou canst not do, at least abstain. Now the memory of the few past little days so works in me that I hardly dare front a new day when I leave my bed. When shall I come to an end of these shameful days and organize honor in every day? September 14th. Yesterday Mr. Mann's address on education. It was full of the modern gloomy view of our democratical institutions, and hence the inference to the importance of schools. But as far as it has betrayed distrust, it seemed to pray, as do all our pulpits, for the consolation of Stoicism. A life of Plutarch would be a great rebuke to such a sad discourse. If Christianity is effete, let us try the doctrine of power to endure. Education. Sad it was to see the death-cold convention yesterday morning, as they sat shivering, a handful of pale men and women in a large church, for it seems the law has touched the business of education with the point of its pen, and instantly it has frozen stiff in the universal congregation of society. And education in things is not. We all are involved in the condemnation of words and age of words. We are shut up in schools and college recitation rooms for 10 or 15 years, and come out at last with a belly full of words and do not know a thing. We cannot use our hands or our legs or our eyes or our arms. We do not know an edible root in the woods. We cannot tell our course by the stars, nor the hour of the day by the sun. It is well if we can swim and skate. We are afraid of a horse, of a cow, of a dog, of a cat, of a spider. Far better was the Roman rule to teach a boy nothing that he could not learn standing. Now here are my wise young neighbors, who instead of getting, like the woodmen, into a railroad car where they have not even the activity of holding the reins, have got it into a boat which they have built with their own hands, with sails which they have contrived to serve as a tent by night, and gone up the Merrimac to live by their wits on the fish of the stream and the berries of the wood. My worthy neighbor, Dr. Bartlett, expressed a true parental instinct when he desired to send his boy with them to learn something. The farm is the right school. The reason of my deep respect for the farmer is that he is a realist and not a dictionary. The farm is a piece of the world, and the schoolhouse is not. The farm, by training the physical, rectifies and invigorates the metaphysical and moral nature. Now so bad we are that the world is stripped of love and terror. Here came the other night an aurora so wonderful, a curtain of red and blue and silver glory, that in any other age or nation it would have moved the awe and words of men, and mingled with the profoundest sentiment of religion and love. And we all saw it with cold arithmetical eyes. We knew how many colors shone, how many degrees it extended, how many hours it lasted, and of this heavenly flower we beheld nothing more, a primrose by the brim of the river of time. Shall we not wish back again the 7 whistlers, the Flying Dutchman, the lucky and unlucky days, and the terrors of the day of doom? I lament that I find in me no enthusiasm, no resources for the instruction and guidance of the people when they shall discover that their present guides are blind. This convention of education is cold, but I should perhaps affect a hope I do not feel if I were bidden to counsel it. I hate preaching, whether in pulpits or in teachers' meetings. Preaching is a pledge, and I wish to say what I think and feel today with the proviso that tomorrow perhaps I shall contradict it all. Freedom boundless I wish. I will not pledge myself not to drink wine, not to drink ink, not to lie, not to commit adultery, lest I hanker tomorrow to do these very things by reason of my having tied my hands. Besides, man is so poor he cannot afford to part with any advantages, or bereave himself of the functions even of one hair. I do not like to speak to the Peace Society, if so I am to restrain me in so extreme a privilege as the use of the sword and bullet. For the peace of the man who has forsworn the use of the bullet seems to me not quite peace, but a canting impotence. But with knife and pistol in my hands, if I from greater bravery and honor cast them aside, then I know the glory of peace. It was a fine corollary of Stoicism that Aristotle said that the honor of chastity consisted in self-sufficiency. The mob are always interesting. We hate editors, preachers, and all manner of scholars and fashionists. A blacksmith, a truckman, a farmer we follow into the barroom, and watch with eagerness what they shall say, for such as they do not speak because they are expected to, but because they have somewhat to say. How sad a spectacle, so frequent nowadays, to see a young man after 10 years of college education come out, ready for his voyage of life, and to see that the entire ship is made of rotten timber, of rotten honeycomb traditional timber, without so much as an inch of new plank in the whole. It seems as if the present age of words should naturally be followed by an age of silence, when men shall speak only through facts, and so regain their health. We die of words. We are hanged, drawn, and quartered by dictionaries. We walk in the vale of shadows. It is an age of hobgoblins. When shall we attain to the real, and be born into the new heaven and earth of nature and truth? It is not good sense to repeat an old story to the same child. Yet the pulpit thinks there is some piquancy or rag of meat in this paragraph about the traitor Judas or the Good Samaritan. Things versus men. How many men can measure themselves with a ton of coals? Over a thing, power and awe hang inseparably. In every moment and change it represents nature, but these transformed men are an impotent canting. September 18th. The teamsters write on their teams, quote, "No monopoly, old Union line, Fitchburg, Groton," etc. On the guideboards they paint, quote, "Free trade and teamsters' rights," With the past, as past, I have nothing to do, nor with the future, as future. I live now, and will verify all past history in my own moments. I heard with great pleasure lately the songs of Jane Tuckerman. The tone of her voice is not in the first hearing quite pure and agreeable. The tone of Abby Warren's voice is much more pure and noble, but the wonderful talent of Miss Tuckerman, her perfect taste, the sweetness of all her tones, and the rich variety and the extreme tenuity with which she spins the thread of sound to a point as fine as a ray of light, makes the ear listen to her with the most delicious confidence. Her songs were better with every repetition. I found my way about in the hollows and alleys of their music better each time. Yet still, her music was a phenomenon to me. I admired it as a beautiful curiosity, as a piece of virtue. It does not marry itself to the mind and become a part of it. She composes me by the serenity of her manners. All conversation among literary men is muddy. I derive from literary meetings no satisfaction. Yet it is pity that meetings for conversation should end as quickly as they ordinarily do. They end as soon as the blood is up, and we are about to say daring and extraordinary things. They adjourn for a fortnight, and when we are reassembled, we have forgot all we had to say. The rich man will presently come to be ashamed of his riches, when he sees he has any accidental advantage, which takes away all the praise of every good thing he does. The race is won by no skill or strength of his, but by the sinews of his good horse. The serene and beneficent life he leads solves the problem of life for nobody but the rich. His wealth, then, if not the earning of his own sweat, is the backbiter and enemy in all men's ears. It is no easy matter to write a dialogue. Cooper, Sterling, Dickens, and Hawthorne cannot. Water is more agreeable to the imagination as an article of diet than any other, because it is a kind of material absolute. The common household tasks are agreeable to the imagination. They are the subjects of all the Greek gems. How trifling to insist on ex-tempore speech or spontaneous conversation and decry the written poem or dissertation or the debating club. A man's deep conviction lies too far down in nature to be much affected by these trifles. Do what you can, your genius will speak from you, and mine from me. September 20th. It is only by doing without Shakespeare that we can do without his book. Be Shakespeare, and we shall value it no longer. So it is with the holy men whose life is recorded in the religious books of the nations. Children like the story that makes them weep better than the ones that make them laugh. Men love the play, or the fight, or the news that scares or agitates them. And the great man loves the conversation or the book that convicts him, not that which soothes and flatters him. For this opens to him a new and great career, fills him with hope. Therefore the great man always keeps before him the transcendent, and humbles himself in its presence. Losing this, he is no longer great. Temperance that knows itself is not temperance. That you cease to drink wine or coffee or tea is no true temperance if you still desire them and think of them. There is nothing angelic there. It is thus far only prudence. The only condition on which I can expect a better sight is that I put off all that is foreign. I am still busy in that initial endeavor. I have not yet arrived at virtue. I burn in purgatory still. Quote, these men, end quote. In Massachusetts, a number of young and adult persons are at this moment the subject of a revolution. They are not organized into any conspiracy. They do not vote or print or meet together. They do not know each other's faces or names. They are united only in a common love of truth and love of its work. They are of all conditions and natures. They are, some of them, mean in attire, and some mean in station, and some mean in body, having inherited from their parents faces and forms scrawled with traits of every vice. Not in churches or in courts or in large assemblies, not in solemn holidays where men met in festal dress, have these pledged themselves to new life, but in lonely and obscure places, in servitude and solitude, and solitary compunctions and shames and fears, and disappointments and diseases, trudging beside the team in the dusty road, or drudging a hireling in other men's cornfields, schoolmasters who teach a few children rudiments for a pittance, ministers of small parishes of the obscurer sects, lone women in dependent condition, matrons and young maidens, rich and poor, beautiful and hard favored, without conceit or proclamation of any kind, have silently given in their several adherents to a new hope. September 24th. Friendship. I do not wish to treat friendship daintily. I have the most romantic relations precisely with my oldest friends. Who is rich, who is fashionable, who is high-bred, has great hindrances to success and friendships. Very hardly will he attain to mastery with all these ribbons, laces, and plumes, in a tug where all the hap depends on eternal facts, on intrinsic nobleness, and the contempt of trifles. Genius and virtue, like diamonds, are best plain set, set in lead, set in poverty, and the highest beauty should be plain set. Those only can sleep who do not care to sleep, and those only can act or write well who do not respect the writing or the act. I have read Oliver Twist in obedience to the opinions of so many intelligent people as have praised it. The author has an acute eye for costume. He sees the expression of dress, of form, of gait, of personal deformities, of furniture, of the outside and inside of houses, but his eye rests always on surfaces. He has no insight into character. For want of key to the moral powers, the author is fain to strain all his stage trick of grimace, of bodily terror, of murder, and the most approved performances of remorse. It all avails nothing. There is nothing memorable in the book except the flash, which is got at a police office, and the dancing of the madman, which strikes a momentary terror. Like Cooper in Hawthorne, he has no dramatic talent. The moment he attempts dialogue, the improbability of life hardens to wood and stone, and the book begins and ends without a poetic ray, and so perishes in the reading. Children are all foreigners. We treat them as such. We cannot understand their speech or their mode of life, and so our education is remote and accidental, and not closely applied to the facts. Day and night are vests only of things. Here is a note from the editor. Here follows a page or more of anecdotes of Cromwell. I have been reading all this in no bigger book than a volume of Lardner's Cabot Cyclopedia by Forster. The man is great, though his historian is small. Cromwell is a droll and always has a design under his dullness or his horseplay. It is odd indeed, his talk to the Parliament. He talks like a porter with his endless expletives and circumstantial statement of nothings and affirmations that he is telling the truth. He is a new combination, and suggests, as every strong nature does, how easily those qualities may be combined in the next babe that is born, which we commonly pronounce incompatible. The inspiration of holiness, for example, with the shrewdest selfishness. We love force, and we care very little how it is exhibited. State is a great game, which is fit for young natures to play at, though not for the strongest, for these selfish fellows never can, in my judgment, compete with the artist. He draws out of the invisible his material, his counters, and then plays his game by a skill not taught or quickened by his appetites. The Cromwells and Caesars are a mob beside him. Histories are written, like this Forester's, in ridiculous deference to all the lowest prejudices. The simple fact of being the potentate of England seems to the good scribe a thing so incredible and venerable that he can never allude to it without new astonishment, and never records a victory without new bows and duckings and impressments, like a Catholic priest kneeling whenever he passes the crucifix and crossing the church. A gentleman sees empire and victory in every right action, and makes no ado about circumstances. Quote, These applications of the wit and mind are tender things. They do not fancy the sun and the cloud, but delight in shade and retirement. Like noble and delicate maidens, they must rather be kept safe at home than brought forth into engagements and perils. Milton to Cromwell. Woods, a prose sonnet. Wise are ye, O ancient woods, wiser than man. Whoso goeth in your paths, or into your thickets where no paths are, readeth the same cheerful lesson, whether he be a young child or 100 years old. Comes he in good fortune or bad, ye say the same things, and from age to age. Ever the needles of the pine grow and fall, and acorns on the oak, the maples redden in autumn. And at all times of the year the ground pine and the perola bud and root under foot. What is called fortune, and what is called time by men, ye know them not. Men have not language to describe one moment of your eternal life. This I would ask of you, O sacred woods, when ye shall next give me somewhat to say, give me also the tune wherein to say it. Give me a tune of your own, like your winds or rains or brooks or birds, for the songs of men grow old when they have been often repeated, but yours, though a man have heard them for 70 years, are never the same, but always new, like time itself, or like love. September 28th. Usefulness is always handsome, uselessness always vulgar. Hint a little service of the household, a lady will instantly do it, a nurse will toss her foolish head with, "Lor, I'll call someone." The life of Raphael is the catalogue of his works. The life of a great artist always is thus inward, a life of no events. Shakespeare has no biography worth speaking. Dante, by how much he had a biography, is by so much the worst artist. For Dante is a person of strong understanding, and shares the vulgar pride of noblemen and fashionists, and seldom a seer. I love the Sunday morning. I hail it from afar. I walk with gladness and a holiday feeling always on that day. The church is ever my desk. If I did not go thither, I should not write so many of the wayward passages. The better place, the better deed. Mr. Dewey said to me that W.C. promised to be a great man 20 years hence. Mr. Felt, then one of the parish committee in the First Church in New York, observed, "Yes, but we want a minister ready grown. He must have his growing elsewhere." So it is with us all. Only fathers and mothers may contentedly be present at the growing. I hate to hear a singer who is learning, let her voice be never so sweet. I wish not to be asked in every note whether I will allow it. I wish every note to command me with sweet yet perfect empire. Also, I hate early poems. A lovely Saturday afternoon, and I walked toward Fairhaven with Henry Thoreau, and admired autumnal red and yellow, and as of old nature's wonderful boxes in which she packs so workmanlike her pine seed and oak seed, and not less the keys of frost and rain and wind with which she unlocks them by and by. Mankind have ever a deep common sense, using that word in the highest style, that guides their judgments so that they are always right in their fames. How strange that Jesus should stand at the head of history, the first character of the world without doubt, but the unlikeliest of all men, one would say, to take such a rank in such a world. Well, then, as if to indemnify themselves for this vast concession of truth, they must put up the militia, Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon, etc., into the next place of proclamation. Yet it is a pit to Olympus, this fame by that or even by the place of Homer, Pindar, and Plato. I can be very wise, very well for myself, but not for another, nor among others. I smile and ignore woe, and if that which they call woe shall come to me, I hope and doubt not to smile still. They smile never, and think joy amiss. All their facts are tinged with gloom, and all my pains are edged with pleasure. But if I intermeddle, if I quit my divine island and seek to write them in particulars, if I look upon them as corrigible individuals, and their fortunes curable, I grow giddy and sceptical presently in their company. Old age is a sad riddle which this stony sphinx reads us. How base to live as the old when now their period of outdoor activity is over, and their sensations, to exist to trifles, to have the palate and the eye and ear and skin so ignominiously wise and knowing, to be a taster and an inexhaustible quittal, to sell the sweet and noble human soul to all the imps of spite and gloom on the cause of an ill-done omelette, heavy cakes, or a draught of air. I can only solve this sad problem by esteeming it a slide in my lamp. It is a shade which adds splendor to the lights. But if I intermeddle, if I esteem it an entity, already my own hair grizzles. Age is to be parried and annihilated to thee, O Son of God, by wrapping thyself in God's eternal youth. Cast thyself frankly, as these sweet children do, into the beauty and joy of this moment. Do not addle the egg with thought, but generously sleep in thy sentiment, in thine act, the arms of the wise God being around thee, and thou shalt take thy being again from him presently refreshed and exalted. But seest thou not that in nature every set sun rises, every loss has a gain, nor shall even this hated phantom, with its evil insignia of baldness, of toothless gums, cracked voice, defaced face, and fumbling, peevish trifling, stand in the wide beauty of the universe hopeless. There is recovery from this lapse, and awakening from this haggard dream. But what is old age? What is the fall? What sin, what death, lying as we do in this eternal soul, originating benefit forevermore? The dullest scholar learns the secret of space and time, learns that time is infinite, that the instruments of God are all commensurate. Is not that lesson enough for a life? The power that deals with us, the power which we study and which we are to inherit as fast as we learn to use it, is, in some, dazzling, terrific, inaccessible. It now benignly shows us in parts and atoms some arc of its magnificent circle, elements which are radically ours. September 29th. A fair child went by who made me think, as others have done, that a mixture of the lathe adds to beauty. The military eye, which I meet so often darkly sparkling, now under clerical, now under rustic brows, such as Robert Bartlett, W. Channing, and our William Shepherd here, the city of Lacedaemon, and the poem of Dante, which seems to a city of Lacedaemon turned into verses. A fine melody again at the church. I always thank the gracious Urania when our chorister selects tunes with solos for my singer. My ear waits for those sweet modulations, so pure of all manner and personality, so universal that they open on the ear like the rising of the world. A walk in the woods is only an exalted dream. Some faces turn on the pivot of the collarbone with eyes that are shallow beads, no more, and some on a pivot at least as deep as the orbit of the sphere, so slow and lazily and great they move. A man is a diamond edition of the world. What comedy or what tragedy like a John Barrett or John Brown or Mr. Smith or Mr. Clark, as we facetiously denominate these incarnations, with all he is and has denoted in his countenance. The foolish science of phrenology is yet founded on this very admiration and sheds lights. Then my babies are the true academy of sculpture. In every house there is a good deal of false hospitality. Relatives come thither of all the degrees of cousindom, and family acquaintances, who like cats frequent the place and not the man. The hero meets with content all his claim on time and labor, and takes care that his hospitality runs fine to the last, as Lamb finely said. But not so the saint. He is so much the servant of absolute goodness that he feels the falsehood of merely feeding and amusing these butterflies and beetles, and austerely tells them so. When I was 13 years old, my uncle Samuel Ripley one day asked me, "How is it, Ralph, that all the boys dislike you and quarrel with you, whilst the grown people are fond of you?" Now am I 36, and the fact is reversed. The old people suspect and dislike me, and the young love me. Never exhort, only confess. All exhortation, O thou horse preacher, respects others and not thyself, respects appearance and not facts, and therefore is cant. Shall I not once paint in these pages an experience so conspicuous to me, and so oft repeated in these late years as the debating club, now under the name of teachers' meeting, now a conference, now an aesthetic club, and now a religious association, but always bearing for me the same fruit, a place where my memory works more than my wit, and so I come away with compunction? In correcting old discourses to retain only what is alive, I discover a good deal of matter which a strong common sense would exclude. I seem, however, to discover in the same passages which I condemn the condemnation of the ideal and holy life, and hence am annoyed by a discrepancy betwixt the two states. I love facts, and so erase this preaching. But also I venerate the good, the better, and did therefore give its place. Cannot Montaigne and Shakespeare consist with Plato and Jesus? The whole world is in conspiracy against itself in religious matters. The best experience is beggarly when compared with the immense possibilities of man. Divine as the life of Jesus is, what an outrage to represent it as tantamount to the universe. To seize one accidental good man that happened to exist somewhere at some time, and say to the newborn soul, Behold thy pattern, aim no longer to possess entire nature, to fill the horizon, to fill the infinite amplitude of being with great life, to be in sympathy and relation with all creatures, to lose all privateness by sharing all natural action, shining with the day, undulating with the sea, growing with the tree, instinctive with the animals, entranced in beatific vision with the human reason. Renounce a life so broad and deep as a pretty dream, and go in the harness of that past individual, assume his manners, speak his speech. This is the madness of Christendom. The little bigots of each town and neighborhood seek thus to subdue the manly and freeborn. But for this poor, dependent fraction of a life, they bereave me of that magnificent destiny which the young soul has embraced with auguries of immeasurable hope. I turn my back on these insane usurpers. The soul always believes in itself. It affirms the eternity and omnipresence of God which these deny. It knows that all which hath ever been is now, that the total world is my inheritance, and the life of all beings I am to take up into mine. By lowly listening, omniscience is for me. By faithful receiving, omnipotence is for me. But the way of the soul into its heaven is not to man, but from man. It leaves every form of life and doctrine that ever existed. It touches no book, or rite, or crutch, or guide, or mediator. It gives itself alone, original, pure, to the lonely original and pure, who on that condition inhabits, leads, and speaks through it. Then is it glad, young, and nimble. It is not wise, but it sees through all things. It is not called religious, but it is innocent. It calls the light its own, and shares the pleasures of all creatures. And yet I know the dangers of this sort of speculation. It is somewhat not wholesome to be said in a detached form. It is not good to say with too much precision and emphasis that we are encroached upon by the claims of Jesus and the current theology. It brings us into a cold, denying, irreligious state of mind. It is of no use to say, Quit Jesus and the saints and heroes. But without the saying which is proud and so suicidal, let us turn our eyes to the vast, the good, the eternal. There fasten the eyes, there build the perpetual hearth and house and altar of the soul, and dare to try the pinions by flights into the transcendent and the unknown. Thou awful cause, hardly with sincerity can I ask that my eye learn to keep upward, so prone is it ever to things around and below. I was about to say, and omitted it in the middle of the last passage, that we have nothing to do with Jesus in our progress, nothing to do with any past soul. The only way in which the life of Jesus or other holy person helps us is this, that as we advance without reference to persons on a new, unknown, sublime path, we, at each new ascent, verify the experiences of Jesus and such souls as have obeyed God before. We take up into our proper life at that moment his act and word, and do not copy Jesus, but readily are Jesus, just as Jesus in that moment of his life was us. Say rather, it was neither him nor us, but a man at this and at that time saw the truth, and was transformed into its likeness. I must not bait my hook to draw men to me. I must angle with myself, and use no lower means. Be Dion to Dion. As much may be gleaned as gathered in strawberry beds, grapevines, and books. This is the end of part 3 of Emerson's journal collection number 30, dating from the year 1839, when the writer was 36 years old. In the next video, we will begin with the entry for October 2nd of that year. Thank you for listening.